Let's speak to Granville Orange. Granville is director of the UK organisation Family Fostercare. I'm delighted to say he's with you on the big Yorkshire phone in here on BBC Radio Leeds. Good afternoon, Granville.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
Is it too difficult to foster children?
I would hope not. I think the programme's covering a great topic, so well done on that. I think that rather than off-putting, the process has to be, for obvious reasons, very thorough as a selection process and a very informative process within which there's a training element. So rather than off-putting, I would rather hope to hear that it's a necessary process, put it that way.
I have to say that for many years I've been aware that councils are very, very keen to speak to people who want to foster. Let's put it that way. I don't get the impression there are people queuing round the block to become foster parents.
No, good foster carers are literally like gold dust, and all fostering agencies, whether they're local authority or like us, one of the many independent foster agencies, are always most welcoming of expressions of interest from prospective foster carers.
I have to say, you need to be somebody pretty special, I think, to do it, but not special in the sense that you need magic skills. I think of a friend of mine, I won't for obvious reasons go into a lot of detail, but they do respite fostering, so they may have children just every now and again, or when things are particularly difficult for their family, they will take them in. And I think alongside your own children, you need to be pretty special to want to do that and to be prepared to have a flexible family like that. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense, and flexibility and the willingness to take on a job which is a most unusual job, because you're taking in other people's children, strange children often. If it's a short-term emergency placement, you might not know very much, if anything, about the child you're about to offer a home to.
So why on earth do it? Why on earth bring this person you don't know? They could be having all sorts of problems. You don't know what they're going to do. They're going to wreck the house. Are they going to be, not fit in with your family? Why on earth would you do it?
Good question. It's about people wanting to give something back in the main. I think that's the main reason that our foster carers get involved. They've got a spare bedroom, which is imperative, and they want to give something back and offer a child who's been through some tough times and in care through no fault of their own another chance, a second chance, a chance to thrive and develop in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be able to.
And let's talk a little about the process, because I think, it would be daft to pretend you could have I fancy fostering, right, you start a week Tuesday. It's never going to be like that. We're talking about young, in some cases, vulnerable young people. What is the process? Just talk us through in general terms that, Granville, because there may be people who, as I have done, have been sitting in the car or on the bike looking at the back of a bus which has got one of those "you could be a fosterer" ads on the back.
Sure, Andrew. Yeah, there's a national process. So whoever you approach to become a foster carer with, whichever agency you might choose, there's a national process, and that involves, as I said, an informative, thorough selection and vetting, which has various stages to it. So you might be invited to what's called Skills to Foster training, which often takes place in an evening or over a weekend, and that's a chance to hear more about fostering and meet other foster carers who will tell you what it's really like, rather than someone telling you what it might be like. Then there's a two-stage process. Stage one involves the checks and references, medicals, the police checks, personal and professional references, etc. And then you move on to stage two, which is about your life story, looking at your relevant experience, your skills, your home, work, your support networks, your hobbies, interests, relationships, and your own children, and how foster children might fit in, if you do have children at home, with your own children, because obviously it's paramount that they're safeguarded as well as the children that we might be placing.
Now, you've just talked in very clear language. I think everybody will have understood that. But you've described a process that even there I can see people thinking, oh, blimey, that sounds an awful lot to go through for something I don't need to do, for something I'm doing out of the goodness of my heart. And yes, I will have some recompense to, compensate me for the work, but also I'll get an awful lot from it if it works. But you can see why people might think, oh, dear, I'm not so sure about going through all of that.
It is very thorough. But at the end of it, one of the things that most of our carers in family foster care seem to enjoy is that they end up with a biography of their life, which is quite an interesting thing to do because you wouldn't do it otherwise. And at the end of the day, it's about safeguarding children, keeping children safe. So when local authorities are placing children with foster carers, they need to know that the place, the home that they're going to has been appropriately and properly checked, and it's going to be a safe placement. And not only that, the children will thrive and develop whilst there. So it can't be a quick process, but there is a time limit, and it should take no longer than 6 months. So it's not going to be next week if you were phoning today, but it should be no longer than a 6-month process.
And of course it's different from adoption, though I am aware that sometimes children who've been fostered do go on to be adopted in certain situations. But what's the minimum, what's the maximum commitment, if I can put it that way, Granville? Because sometimes practicalities are important, aren't they?
They are, and you mentioned respite care, so the minimum commitment is if you're interested in occasionally doing some fostering. We've got carers who will do maybe a weekend a month and help other foster carers out. And then the other end of that spectrum is you commit long-term to children that, for whatever reason, will not be going home. They'll be in the looked-after system till they're 18 plus, and they might need a home for the next 10 years. So those are the sort of different ends of the spectrum, if you like. And as you mentioned in your introduction, the need, particular need at the moment that we find in Yorkshire is for teenage placements, mother and baby placements, and sibling group placements. And
that presumably, say if you take the sibling group thing, is people thinking, well, I might be able to cope with one, but 2 or 3, that's a bit of an issue. So there are some practical factors then. Sure, number of bedrooms is critical, isn't it? So having at least one free bedroom is fundamental. And older kids, you can see people thinking, that might be a bit of a handful of stroppy teenager versus, a cute 4-year-old. Yes. It's horses for courses. It's some people will want to do the younger children from pre-adoption babies onwards, and yet we've got some wonderful examples in family foster care of teenagers joining us and having their lives turned around, and leaving us at 18 plus as capable, confident young adults. You know what, I'd love it if someone gave us a call as a result of hearing our conversation this lunchtime, somebody who's been considering it, somebody who is a fosterer, somebody who was themselves fostered. I'd love to get that call, hear that story. You're there, I know you're there, and you're listening. I'd love you to pick the phone up and give us a call this lunchtime. Granville, been very nice to speak to you, and just mention again the particular groups that we're looking for here in Yorkshire in terms of people who need a bit of fostering. Yes, we've got offices in East Yorkshire and Doncaster, but the need that we find is for teenagers, mother and baby placements, and sibling groups. Well, it's been very good to speak to you, Granville. Thanks very much. Thanks for your programme. Thank you, Andrew. Bye. Nice to speak to you. Granville Orange is director of the UK organisation Family Foster Care.